In the winter of 2001, I realized I had not left my apartment in 11 days. Not because I was sick, because I had run out of reasons to. I was 76 years old and I had taught school for 28 years and organized this neighborhood for 20 more. And I had nothing I was reaching for. My closest friend Beulah looked at the same situation and said, "The good part is over. Now I'm just waiting." She died at 83. I am 97. The difference between us is one question I started asking myself every single morning, and I have not missed a day in 22 years. In the winter of 2001, I realized I had not left my apartment in 11 days. Not because I was sick, not because the weather was bad enough to stop me. I have lived in Birmingham my whole life, and I have seen weather. And what we had that January was cold, but not impossible. I had not left because I had run out of reasons to, and I had sat with that fact for 3 of those 11 days before I understood what it actually meant. It didn't mean I was depressed, though maybe I was. It didn't mean I was giving up, though maybe I was doing that too. What it meant, in the most precise and frightening sense, was that I had stopped asking myself whether I wanted anything. And when you stop asking, the answer defaults to nothing. And nothing is very comfortable. And comfort is an excellent reason to stay inside for 11 days. I was 76 years old. My husband James had been gone for 5 years. My children were grown and good and attentive in the way that grown children are attentive when they live in other cities and call on Sundays. I had taught school for 28 years and organized half this neighborhood for 20 years after that, and there was not a single morning of my adult life up to that point that had not been structured around something I was needed for. And then the needing had slowed, the way it does, and I had not replaced it with wanting. And here I was, 76 years old, in a warm apartment in January, with nowhere to be and nothing I was reaching for. I want to tell you what that felt like, because I think you know the feeling, and I think you may be somewhere closer to it than you realize. It felt like waiting, not for anything specific, not for a phone call or an appointment or a season to change. Just waiting, the way a room waits when no one is in it. Present, intact, not suffering, simply not in motion. I had become, without deciding to, a room that no one was using. I was born in Birmingham in 1927, and I have lived here for all 97 years of my life, which means I have watched this city be one thing, and then another thing, and then another. And I have had opinions about all of it, and have said so on more occasions than my children found comfortable. I taught 3rd and 4th grade at 16th Street Elementary for 28 years. Children whose names I can still tell you, most of them, whose faces I can still find in the albums of my memory. And when I retired from teaching, I did not retire from the neighborhood, because the neighborhood was where everything that mattered to me was happening, and I was not built for the sideline. James and I were married for 43 years. He was a mechanic and later a shop owner, and always the kind of man who fixed what needed fixing without making a production of it, which I found for most of those 43 years to be exactly the right quality in a person, and occasionally, when I needed something acknowledged rather than fixed, exactly the wrong one. We managed. We loved each other in the specific, worn-in way of people who have spent decades in the same house and know which floorboards creak and which windows stick, and have stopped needing to explain themselves from scratch every time something comes up. When he died in 1996, I organized the grief the way I organized everything, with structure, with forward motion, with the next thing and the thing after that. I was good at forward motion. I had been practicing it my whole life. What I was not good at, what I had never had to be good at, because James was there, and the school was there, and the neighborhood was always there, was the interior question. The one that has nothing to do with what anyone else needs. What do I want? The seed of the 11 days was not grief. The seed was earlier, much earlier, and it was this. I had spent my entire adult life answering the question of what was needed before I answered the question of what I wanted. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped noticing the difference. Need was always louder. Need had faces and deadlines and consequences. Want was quiet and personal and could always wait until the needs were handled. And the needs were never fully handled. And so the want got very little practice. By the time James died, and the school was behind me, and the children were grown, and the neighborhood didn't need me the way it once had, the want was so quiet I couldn't hear it. I had spent 50 years not listening for it, and now I needed it, and it wasn't answering. That was what the 11 days were. Not depression, not giving up. A woman who had forgotten how to want anything, sitting in a warm apartment, waiting for the feeling to come back on its own. It didn't come back on its own. It never does. Beulah Simmons was my closest friend for 60 years. From the time we were young women in the same neighborhood, raising children at the same time, until she died in 2006. We lost our husbands within 4 years of each other, and we talked about grief the way old friends talk about it, without the careful language people use when they are afraid to say the wrong thing, just plainly because we had known each other long enough to speak plainly. After her husband died, Beulah said something I have thought about ever since. She said, "The good part is over. Now I'm just waiting." She said it without self-pity, almost with relief actually, like a woman who has finished a long journey and is glad to sit down. She was 72 years old. She sat down. She watched television. She went outside when she needed to and not when she didn't. She was warm and funny and present when you were with her. And she had simply decided that the part of her life that required reaching for things was behind her. She died at 83. I watched her make that choice, and I understood it. I understood it because I was making a version of it myself in that apartment in January 2001. The difference between us was not that I was stronger or braver or more optimistic. The difference was that one morning something arrived that asked me a question, and I answered it honestly, and the answer turned out to be a reason to get up. One morning in late January 2001, I don't remember the exact date, just the quality of the light, which was the particular gray-white of a winter morning when the sun is behind clouds and everything looks like it is waiting for permission to begin. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and I asked myself, not as a practice, not as a technique, just because the silence was complete enough that the question could form. What do I still want to do today? Not what I should do, not what needed doing, not what anyone was expecting of me, or what would be good for me, or what I was going to do out of obligation or habit. What did I, Rosalie Whitfield, at 76 years old, on this particular grey morning, actually want? The fact was this: I sat there for a long time, maybe 15 minutes, maybe more. The coffee went from hot to warm, I was not thinking hard. I was listening, the way you listen for a sound you're not sure you heard, tilting toward it, waiting to see if it comes again. And what came eventually was small. It was almost embarrassingly small. I wanted to go to the garden. The community garden 2 blocks over, the one I had helped start in 1989 and had been tending in various capacities ever since. I wanted to go there, not because anything needed doing. It was January, nothing needed doing. But because I wanted to put my hands in the dirt and smell it, and I had been inside for 11 days, and I wanted to be outside. The interior, I almost dismissed it. I almost said to myself, that's not enough. That's not a real reason. What I needed was not a garden. What I needed was purpose, structure, something worth getting up for in a large and meaningful sense. A garden in January was not large. It was not meaningful in any way that justified 11 days of not leaving the apartment. I sat with the dismissal for a moment, and then I thought, but it's what you want. And I put on my coat. The detail I cannot shake, the cold of that morning, the specific cold of Birmingham in January, which is not the brutal cold of northern cities, but has a particular bite to it, damp and direct, and the sound my shoes made on the sidewalk, unhurried, deliberate, 2 blocks of a woman walking towards something she wanted, not something she owed, is a sound I have reconstructed many times, because I understood somewhere on that walk that something had changed, not fixed, changed. The question had found an answer. The answer was the garden, and the garden was enough. I started keeping a notebook in 2003. Small thing, I have gone through 14 of them now. 1 line per day, written every morning before I do anything else, before the coffee is finished, before the light is fully up. The line is the answer to the question, what do I still want to do today? 22 years of answers, all in 1 line, all in my handwriting, all true in the way that early morning honesty is true, unguarded, not yet organized into something presentable. Some days the answer is large. I want to call my granddaughter and tell her something I've been carrying. Some days it is very small. I want to eat a good breakfast sitting down. Some days, on the hard days, on the days when the body is difficult and the losses are heavy, and 97 feels like a very long time to have been alive. The answer is, I want to see the light on the garden this morning. The light on the garden is enough. It has always been enough. What the notebook showed me over years of reading back through it is the shape of a want, how it changes with age, how it shrinks in some directions and expands in others, how the big wants, the ones organized around other people and outcomes and achievements, give way, slowly and without drama, to the smaller ones, the ones that are entirely personal, the ones that don't need anyone else to validate them. I wanted at 76 to be useful again. I wanted at 82 to see my youngest grandson grow up. I wanted at 89 to make it to the centennial of the neighborhood association I helped start. I wanted at 94 to taste my daughter's cooking one more time. I wanted this morning to tell you this. The wants have always been answerable. That is the thing I keep learning. The cost I paid for 50 years of prioritizing need over want. The invisible cost, the one that accumulated without receipts, was the weakening of the wanting muscle. The capacity to locate what I actually desired beneath the layers of what was expected and what was practical and what served the people around me had gotten thin from disuse by the time I needed it most. In the first years after James died, people asked me what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. They meant it kindly. They were asking about travel, about hobbies, about the things retirement was supposed to open up. And I would answer in the language of the reasonable. I want to spend more time with the grandchildren. I want to keep up with the garden. I want to stay healthy. And all of it was true, and none of it was the real answer. Because the real answer required a depth of self-knowledge that I had not practiced. And you cannot practice a thing you have never had to use. Beulah had the same muscle, weak in the same way. The difference between us was not that I had more reasons to live, or more people depending on me, or better health, or better circumstances. The difference was one gray morning in January when I asked myself a question and stayed with it long enough to hear the answer, and then went outside. Last Tuesday I was in the community garden. April, warm already, the soil doing what soil does in Alabama in April, which is become very alive very quickly. I was on my knees. I have a pad I use now, my knees being what they are at 97. And a young woman stopped on the sidewalk and looked at me and said, "How do you do it?" She meant, I think, How does a 97-year-old woman get on her knees in a garden on a Tuesday morning in April? I looked up at her and I said, I asked myself the question this morning, and the answer was this garden, so here I am. She looked at me for a moment and then she said, What question? And I told her the same way I'm telling you. I want to be clear about something before I say anything else. I am not telling you that this question is magic. I am not telling you that 97 years of life have led me to some secret that younger people don't have access to. I do not have a secret. I have a question, and I have 22 years of practice asking it, and I have the specific knowledge that comes from asking it on the days when the answer was easy and on the days when finding the answer felt like reaching into a very dark room and hoping something was there. Something was always there. That is the only thing I know for certain. Not always something large, not always something that would make sense to anyone else, but always something, some small, specific, honest want that was mine and that could be answered by something I was capable of doing on that particular day. That is what keeps me getting up. Not discipline, not attitude, not some quality of character I was born with that other people lack. A question, and the practice of answering it honestly every single morning before I do anything else. I know what you're doing instead of asking the question. I know because I did it for 50 years. You are waking up and immediately filling the space with what needs to happen. The email, the appointment, the thing you promised, the obligation that has been waiting since yesterday. You move from need to need the way a person moves through a crowded room. Efficiently, purposefully, without stopping. And by the end of the day, you have handled most of what was required, and you are tired, and the question of what you wanted has not been asked, and therefore not answered. And you go to sleep, and you wake up, and you do it again. This works fine until it doesn't. It works fine until the needs change, until retirement comes, or a loss, or a child leaves, or the structure that was holding the days together shifts. And you reach for the want, and you find it has gotten very quiet from not being listened to. And the quiet is not peaceful. It is the quiet of a room that no one has been in for a long time. I am not judging this. I lived it. I lived it until a gray January morning when I was 76 and alone and hadn't left my apartment in 11 days and had to sit very still for 15 minutes before I could hear what I actually wanted.